Welcome to the Dog Classroom.
The Dog Classroom podcast. I am your co-host, Anne-Marie.
And I'm your co-host, Amelia.
Like and subscribe
on Spotify and YouTube in video format. And now into the episode.
Here we go. Welcome back, everybody, to the Dog Classroom podcast. We are going to talk about introducing dogs today. I have 20 things going through my brain right now, and I just can't wait to get them out.
Yeah, well, we sort of organized it a little bit. So I know as soon as we released the Multi-Dog Household podcast, I got a few messages right away, but they were like, but how, right? And I was like, wait, it's coming.
Okay.
And so now we can sort of explain whether you're introducing a new dog to your house to live there, or you just want to go for a walk with your friend's dog, or whatever the situation
Which basically is going to start off and be roughly the same anyway.
Yeah.
The thing, just to sort of get out of the way, right away, is ideally don't let your dog drag you towards the person with you sort of on the end of the leash.
And I would say if your dog has a history of being reactive, then maybe you want to introduce them with a certified trainer such as Anne-Marie first.
Yeah, there we go.
Instead of trying to do it by yourself, because you really don't want anyone to get injured. But overall, with a friendly and general dog, this would be sort of the way that we would recommend.
But even with the friendly dog, letting them drag you towards or moving quickly towards the other dog may not end up as well as you thought it would. But as soon as that dog realizes that they can drag you to other dogs and people, it may become just a little bit of an issue and a little bit hazardous too.
Yeah, and well, you never know how another dog, if it's not your own, right? If you are meeting up with your friend and your dog drags you toward that dog, like that's rude, dog to dog wise.
Yeah.
So you never know, right? That could end up in some kind of scuffle.
Yeah.
So I think whether both dogs are friendly or whatever, it still doesn't hurt to take the time to introduce them properly.
Right. So when we say introduce them properly, we're going to actually talk location. Yes. Right. So the unfortunate thing, what some people do is bring one dog to the other dog's house, let them off in the backyard and cross their fingers. Don't really suggest to do that. You want neutral ground.
Yeah. Because you don't know, right? People say, oh, my dog's never been territorial before. But
have they ever met a dog on their property before?
Exactly. Yeah. So neutral is usually going to be the best. We're going to say, like, go for a walk somewhere that isn't, not just right in front of your house because your dog doesn't know your property line.
Yep.
That's one that I
say that all the time.
From the reactive dog seminars, your dog doesn't understand property lines, so they don't know that that's not their yard if you walk from your front door to down the street, right? So you want to put them in the car or walk far enough away from the house that there's not going to be the territorial component.
Yeah, for sure. So neutral can be, usually I say neutral territory, not ideally, busy city streets, because then you got to have a traffic component. The other thing is you want to make sure that no other dogs are going to, run towards you or complicate things. Just don't complicate things.
Yeah.
Go to a nice park somewhere that's open. Engaging in conversation with the other owner is helpful because then it shows your dog that they're relaxed with this other dog and person there. Mm-hmm. The way I like to start it, and what we say, and we must say like 5-10 times a day, do a U-turn, right?
Yes, because you can't, the dog's going to be excited. There's another member of their species right there. So obviously they're going to want to pull and jump toward them, or they might know the other person.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So they might want to be excited and go and see that person, but you gotta be able to approach somewhat calmly. So we do U-turns first and make sure that the dog is sort of walking with you.
Yeah.
The other thing to mention is that this is on leash, right?
Oh yes. Yeah. So definitely on leash, because I feel that you need to have like a fair playing field. So I usually say, especially if you're going to a dog park, all dogs are either off leash or all dogs are on leash. So it's fair, but just to say, as far as a U-turn, when Amelia and I say that in our terminology, but it's just basically turning 180 degrees and going back a few steps. Because I feel what the dog learns or gives them the opportunity is to regroup a little bit, get attention back on you, and then go back in. So once you've done the U-turns a few times, we do suggest like a little bit of following each other.
Yeah, so you would have one dog following the other from a safe enough distance, right? You're not going to let them jump on the other dog or get all up in there. You want to make sure that they're being polite about it. So you're going to have one dog and you're going to follow your friend, right, with the other dog. And then also switching that.
Yes.
Right? So that
so switching who's following. Yeah.
And I know, like, for Stark is always better when he's the one following. He does not like to be in front. He wants to see what's going on ahead of him. So you might notice different stress signals from your dog doing one versus the other.
Yeah, for sure. Because some dogs, if they're behind, want to pull to catch up. Some dogs feel really uncomfortable with other dogs behind them. But the other thing I say is when you're following another dog, as I always say, you know, bums are less intimidating than something sort of coming face to face. Once you've sort of done the following, and then I like to say parallel walking. Yeah. So when we're parallel walking, it sort of means that the owners are walking side to side, and then eventually I like to have the dogs on the outside to start.
Yeah, so you want to have like dog, person, person, dog.
Yeah.
And they're far enough away that they're not just going to cross over in front of you and get to the other dog. Because you want to let them see each other from the side instead of head on.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the issues that come from leash greetings, and we always hear people saying like, oh, you know, don't do leash greetings, it's bad. It's because it's face to face.
Yeah.
They're running. Like there's just no sort of control of that situation. And then, of course, the body language is missed because there's the leashes involved.
Yeah.
So I think every step of the way, looking at body language is important. And then also with the parallel walking is it allows them just to see and to smell, right?
Yeah, because even remember, we just tell people they don't actually have to like actually smell the dog to smell the dog, right? Like they're getting different smells off of their pheromones and that sort of thing. So figuring out who they are. And I think in doing these exercises, it just give each of the dogs a little bit more opportunity to watch them and figure them out a little bit and become a little bit more comfortable, so you will have more success.
I think too, when I've done parallel walking, you can also like switch sides, right? So one dog has maybe peed or their footsteps have been on the one side, and then they can go and sniff where those paw pads were, where they peed or whatever. Yeah. And they can sort of exchange scents that way too.
Yeah, it's funny actually you're saying that. Kelsey and I were just before this talking that walking a dog yesterday, and as soon as we had turned around and the dog walked by and we came out again, like she was just frantically sniffing the snow and stuff and sort of tracking the scent a little bit, which was rather interesting. So I guess the way we are looking at that is as a training opportunity, right? If that's the way we need to start socializing her, with her just smelling where other dogs have been, and then we eventually introduce them. So just a bit of an aside there, but
yeah. And we went for a walk earlier with some dogs, and after we came in,
did Stark go out?
I let Stark out, and he went and sniffed exactly where those dogs had been. He knew where they were, and he went down that path.
Every little pee.
Every, like, even just where they had walked, like, he just, and I let him just sniff everything, because I was like, I want you to take all that information in, and I don't know what he's getting out of it, but
but then also knowing, hopefully, that it was okay that other dogs were on his property. Yeah.
And so there's definitely, like, you don't have to just go for a walk, and then people want to, like, walk side by side like they would with their friend. You want to give them a little bit of distance. You want dogs on the outside. Then you want, like, person, dog. Yeah,
and then you slowly bring them in the inside. The thing to say is this may not happen in one walk.
Right.
Like, honestly, it depends on the dogs. It depends on the dog's personality. Are they a little bit more shy and timid? Are they almost too outgoing? Like, and I think what we keep saying with this walking is we're hoping or anticipating that the dog does have a little bit of walking skills and is able to look to the owner for the guidance component as far as like turning and moving.
Yeah, like you don't want to be trying to train your dog loose leash walking while also trying to introduce them to another dog. That's what I mean, yeah. That would be a lot of stuff to do at once. But if, let's say, maybe it's like a puppy, right? You're introducing them to a puppy. You're not going to take this puppy out for an hour and work on introducing. You're going to do like 15 minutes and then go somewhere else. And it's not going to all happen just sort of overnight in one session.
I think it's to stress that, because I just think somebody thinks like I'm just going to do this. It's going to take 5 minutes. Boom, we're done. It depends on personalities. And here we go, a whole thing with the different personalities, right? And say it's a little dog and a big dog. Well, the little dog is going to be possibly more intimidated by the bigger dog. It's just say, let the dog set the pace. And that's where you need to take it from the beginning. Let the dog set the pace. Don't like have too high goals or I don't want to say unexpected, but just let it happen, right?
Right. And what I say to people too is when it's going really well, and this is something that I have to remind myself too.
Yeah.
Don't get greedy. Don't just be like, you know what, it's going well. Let's just take the leashes off and let's just see.
Or just let's go a little bit longer.
Yeah, a little bit longer. No. End on a high note. When your dog is relaxed body language, when they're having a good time. Call it and just reconvene another time. Because it's so important that we don't see, oh, there's a little bit of progress there, I'm just going to push it, and then we ruin everything. And I'd rather it take a few times for my dog to get used to this dog that's going to be in his life for maybe years, right? Versus we screw it up the first time, and then, now it's going to take a whole lot longer.
Yeah. So in going from that, whether it's another training session or hopefully more than likely it's another training session, but how do we actually get dogs to sniff each other?
Right. And that's another thing that's important with, you don't want to do it face to face, right?
And I was going to say, ideally, I was just going to joke with you and say, okay, do we let them go nose to nose? But ideally, when you see two dogs sniffing, right? They're circling because then you have nose to butt. It was pretty funny in puppy school. A few of the owners were getting a little embarrassed about their puppies sniffing. Yeah. Puppy's parts. Yeah. Anyway, I said, you know what? You might as well get used to it because, you have a boy dog and that's just what they do.
Well, and it's a polite greeting, right? As long as they're
for
not
them,
overdoing it.
Yeah.
But I've actually had, in one of my next step classes, we had lots of dogs who were having some frustration on leash and weren't able to greet nicely. And we actually worked on going in circles together. Like we started wide circle and then
you go tighter.
And then you just work on doing that little circle so that they get a chance to sniff.
That's a good idea.
And we did that until everybody was sort of like, okay, I have the information about that dog. And
then they're less focused or fixated.
Because they already have the scent and they already are like, okay, I'm somewhat familiar with you. Like, I no longer need to be, like, we don't have to let them just run up and start sniffing and licking and all this stuff. Like, we can do it in a calmer way. You can do it on leash by walking in circles.
Yeah.
Right? Or if one dog tends to be really timid and the other one doesn't seem to mind, is having the more confident dog going in front and having the timid dog sort of like reach in and do the little
butt sniff.
Little butt sniff.
And I like my words, butt sniff, yeah.
Yeah, but I know for Stark, like, again, just speaking from my experience with it, if he is not comfortable, he will not offer that sniff.
Right.
So I'm never going to take a cookie and lure him up to the dog. I'm just going to say, today's not the day.
Right.
Right? And just sort of
or that's not the dog.
Yeah, or that's not the dog. And I also try not to approach just always in a straight line, even if he's behind the dog. I try to sort of move, left to right or little zigzags here and there so that he has the opportunity to sort of do a little drive-by, I call it. And then he doesn't have to just straight up approach.
Yeah.
The other important thing is that it's fast.
Yeah. So in Amelia's little notes here, we always say 2 to 3 seconds sniff. And that's why I stress recall on leash.
Yes.
Important. So then we recall our dogs out, get them to create distance. But the bonus is, since they did so well, they get to go back and sniff a little bit longer. And then we call them out. When I say call out, it does make a huge difference. But some people get so nervous that they'll sort of pull the dog quickly or jolt the leash. And it's a lot of times will startle the dog.
Yeah.
And then they give like a little growl or grunt. And then the other dog does. And then we're a little bit stuck in some situations. So it's really important to have that situation calm, have the sniff, and then work on that recall out.
Yeah, the leash in this, like once you get to this point, the leash is really just there as a backup, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't be putting any pressure on the leash. You shouldn't be dragging one dog to the other. You shouldn't have to pull them away from each other. And I think like the 3 seconds is probably the max for me. Like when I'm just starting it with a new dog,
It feels
like,
forever though.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, 1 sniff, out. 1 sniff, 2 sniff out.
Yeah.
And then we work up to 3.
Yeah.
Because any longer than that, and you'll notice the changes in the body language, and they start to stiffen up, and they start to get a little bit like, oh, I'm stuck here in this situation.
Yeah.
And so calling them out before they get to that point can help keep it as that positive experience instead of, oh, I got upset and I got pulled out of there.
Right. And then this is where the whole don't be greedy idea comes into play.
Exactly.
Like, end on a good note. And then next time you see each other, do longer sniffs. Like, you don't have to sit there and work all the way up to 30 seconds or 45 seconds, right?
Yeah. Well, who wants to be sniffed for 30 seconds? That'd be annoying, right?
Yeah.
But then you can go to maybe on the next walk, you're on long lines and you're letting them sort of move freely and sniff each other as they want to, but you still have that leash there as a backup.
Yeah. And the idea of what I say sometimes is like some hovering. So after you had this 3-second sniff, keep walking a little bit and then pause again. Like, nobody says you have to stand there for like 5 minutes. The dogs are going to do way better if they sniff a bit and keep walking and sniff a bit and keep walking. And I guess that's what I refer to hovering. Is just us pausing and the dogs being within each other's space for a very short period of time, and then we move again. And if you have like such a beautiful success like this one, the next one you do, the dog will get better and be more confident and better and more confident, and it just sort of keeps building that way instead of having the negative associations.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good sort of example as to like when you let them sort of hover a little bit. If we're thinking about dog body language and communication, if we have our dogs there and we have these tight leashes and we're forcing them to stare at each other, that's confrontational.
Yes.
Right? Whereas if we're standing a little bit and then we keep moving, that's more natural for them too. So I think a lot of the problems that we see is like, oh, I saw my friend on a walk and I wanted to stop and chat with them for 5 minutes and our dogs are just staring at each other. So of course they're going to, have some words about that.
Okay, one thing I just thought that I just want to mention real quick, because I still think we're okay for time, is if your dog drops down in a stalking position, right? Or if your dog is really staring at another dog, you as the owner need to pick up on it and redirect that, because if that is happening towards the other dog, that is very confrontational. And if I was, had my dog walking towards your dog and it was down stalking mine, I would turn around and go the other way. I wouldn't wanting to meet you or even get close, because I've seen like Maui and Frolic that time. I told you we were out and that dog was down and stalking and they wanted no reason to move past or go towards that dog. Some people don't really realize that's intimidating.
Yeah, they think the dog is just patiently waiting.
Yes, waiting or playing.
Or playing.
Yeah, nah.
Yeah, and especially like when you see it from the herding braids and you're like, that's a hard stare. Like that's not necessarily, hey, I'm going to wait for that dog to come to me and be friends. That's I'm going to pounce when you get there, which can be really scary for a lot of dogs. Yeah,
so basically, as a little aside to say that, but that might not be the best time to greet that particular dog if that scenario is happening. Right.
Okay.
So,
and on that same note, as to things that maybe people think are polite but are not, rearing up on the back legs. I've seen a lot of that recently, and the dogs sort of go up on their back legs and they're like, oh, it's funny, like they're hugging or whatever. And I'm like, no, that's a pretty rude behavior. I would say a lot of dogs are going to find that offensive, and they're maybe going to scrap about it if your dog rears up like that when they greet. Sometimes it's due to just the dog is on leash, right?
Yeah.
And so
they're pulling and they automatically go up.
But if they're off leash and that's happening, like that's a confrontational behavior as well, or putting their chin over top of another dog.
Yes.
So when you're doing this greeting, when you're doing the 3-second sniff, you want to make sure that it's a polite initial greeting, that you're not seeing any of this stalking or any of this jumping.
Well, and the bonus is ideally you're watching both sets of dogs, right? So you're watching yours as well as the other one. But after the 3-second greeting, you're like, oh, I'm not sure about this. Well, great. Way you go. Yep, you're done.
So going on from that, let's say everything goes perfectly. There's no rude body language. We're just loving it. We get together again. We want to let the dogs off leash. How are we going to do it?
So we're going to restart from square one. We're going to walk around the block together. You had mentioned possibly having a long line, so they're having just a little bit more distance from you interacting. I like the parallel walking where the dogs are sort of bumping one another. And then ideally what we do is pause, a little bit of sniffing, walk, pause, and then we drop leashes.
Yeah, so you're kind of like everything from step one just goes a lot faster.
A lot faster,
by the end. You're not having to spend, a 45-minute walk working on parallel walking. You can just do it for 2-3 minutes and then you're okay. When they drop the leashes, let's say they're best of friends and they start to wrestle right away. What are your thoughts on that?
Then eventually, I think with dogs anyway, whether I was going to say it depends on, how long I'm in that moment, but I would let them wrestle. Yeah, the long lines are tricky. Yes, they get tied up in them a little bit, but if this is a newer dog or they're developing a relationship, I'm going to interrupt it anyway, every sort of little bit. And, I'm not going to say an exact time, 30 seconds to a minute. I'm going to watch body language. If they're playing nice and having times where they start sniffing or decompress themselves, then I'm going to stay out of it. But, and again, last night in doing this with some introductions with dogs and puppies is once I could sort of figure them out and they figured each other out, we took the leashes off.
Yeah, and I think we see that in classes, right? Because we do playtime in some of our classes.
Yeah.
And when you see them start to actually settle themselves down, it's so beautiful because they'll get in there and they'll wrestle and then they'll be like, okay, that was a bit much. I'm going to go sniff over here.
Yeah.
And they just sort of decompress and then they get back to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the healthiest way for them to interact. It's not that nonstop wrestling for...
Yeah, and you want to make sure that they're both into the same style of play.
Right.
And again, we can do a whole nother podcast on style of play. Actually, we should write that down. But different breeds playing differently. Like some more like to wrestle, some more like to chase. Some dogs like to be chased, some dogs like to do the chasing. So, and again, personalities, they're just like kids. Not all kids like to play with one another because if they have different styles and different meshes, and sometimes that works for dogs. So it's again about compromise and figuring things out, because I had the conversation where and this was last week with a client where his dog only plays with his housemate. And so they play very rough and they have their own style. And since he hasn't played with any other dog, we gave him the opportunity, but then he plays this really rough, overwhelming play style because he thinks that's what you do with all dogs.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why it's also important to play where they learn to hold back a little bit and adjust different play styles to different personalities. And then that's the whole world of socialization again, right?
So why don't you summarize for us a little bit? So you're introducing dogs.
Don't set the expectations of what's going to happen. Allow the dog to set the different stages and the way things are going to happen. Suggest at least having a little bit of leash work on your dog, right? And working at attention a little bit. And then what you're going to start to do is just do a few U-turns, dogs seeing each other from a distance, get into those following positions, switching those out in the parallel walking. This may be one session. You may do this for 5 sessions. Okay. But the thing is, when you put the time in, it's worth it, because if this is going to be like a family member and you guys are going to be like camping or hanging out and stuff like that, then it's worth putting the effort to have a proper introduction, because then they're going to be lifelong buddies, right?
Exactly.
So I want you to do that. And then once you have, the parallel walking, you do a little bit of sniffing, call them out, little bit of sniffing again, and then working at dropping those leashes. Definitely at the beginning, not to say that I'll just, take the dogs and we go inside and, have dinner and the dogs are playing by themselves in the backyard. That comes with time, right? So you want to make sure that, the play styles are good and that nobody is, getting overwhelmed,
right? That
sort of thing. So, but I honestly think it's time, and I think it's worth the time if that person's going to be, in your life for a period of time, and then working up to being able to do leash walks together, going to each other's play. We say starting in a neutral area, then eventually the next step is, meeting at somebody's house,
right?
Each other's, and then do the walk first, then go in the backyard and drop the leashes. I just want to make that point because I think we forgot about when to actually get back on property. So Yeah. And then interaction play, interrupting play. And then there you go. Now they're friends. And
yeah. You have a lifelong
and repeat,
friend.
right?
I think it's important also that we've had a lot of clients who say, I'm nervous. I don't understand dog body language very well. Can you help me? And that's definitely something that you do with private lessons and behavior consults, is helping people to introduce their dogs. So if that's something that you're in Thunder Bay and you're interested in, contact Anne-Marie about that, because she can definitely help you to introduce your dog to other dogs. And you can find her on Instagram, Facebook,
I was going to say Spotify,
TikTok. Well, you can't really find you on Spotify. You can find her at thedogclassroom.com. You can find her on social media. Well, you can find me on social media.
I was just going to say you can find Amelia, and she knows how
direct you to
she
her.
knows how to find me. So
yeah. But definitely there is help available if that's something that just people aren't comfortable with, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, we're trying to get the information out there, and please, if you have any questions about any topics, let us know, because we like to share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.